Your imagination and the fact that it's been dormant for a few years could be why your job search feels like you're hitting your head against the wall. And this is especially true if you are a marketer. So I wanted to talk about the disconnect between using your imagination to help build someone else's dream, i.e., an employer, versus using the same imagination to building out and seeing to fruition your job search dreams, right? So let's talk about that in terms of what it is that you are bringing to the table when it comes to your job search versus what you might not be using. And I want to argue the fact that you have accessible to you an enormous capacity to reimagine your future, reimagine your job search, and reimagine what is possible at this stage of your career as a marketing professional. But before that, I wanted to just kind of take a step back, right? So here's the thing. My understanding is that right now, from a US perspective, it feels like the world might be crumbling. It feels like there's no room to imagine anything but survival. It might feel as if really right now, all that you can hope for at best is landing an opportunity that barely meets your needs, right? And I want to really help you rethink what is possible, reimagine what can happen if you started to really bring your all pertaining to your job search and your all pertaining to just the use of your imagination. So let's talk about that in a bit of detail. So I wanted to just say, let's just think about some of the people that you've worked with, the people that you admire the most, yourself, when you were thriving in the job market, when you're thriving in an employer, and think about everything that you did for that employer, how you went to the moon and back for an employer, how you actually turned water into wine for a client, how you pulled something off that you thought was impossible for someone else. I see this all the time. What I see is a lot of professionals, marketers, ambitious, creative, imaginative professionals using all those skills, qualities, and even bringing a sense of urgency to help someone else build their dreams. And I wanted to mention that you can take the same sense of possibilities, the same sense of imagination, and you could actually apply it to this moment and feel like you're thriving, even while the world feels like it's falling apart or crumbling down. And something that I wanted to just bring forth is, imagine if you did bring all of your creativity to the table pertaining to building out your dream. Imagine if you used your imagination to actually build something that you can be proud of once the pandemic is gone. Imagine if you could have conversations with powerful players in your ideal sector and have a seat at the table, instead of feeling constricted, fearful, agitated, uncertain, all those negative emotions. What if? So I want you to really just think to yourself. Imagine what it would be like if you had to fulfill someone else's dream. What would you do? Would you go to the ends of the earth? Would you really put yourself in their shoes? Would you have the courage to speak to people that are in positions of power? Would you get up 1 hour earlier? Would you actually step outside of your comfort zone, take a risk, take a bet or place a bet on yourself or that person, right? And a lot of times, human nature is to do a lot more for someone else. And for some reason, not to do the same for yourself. And I wanted to just mention that in this job search, if you are headed in the direction of a crappy job, then I can 100% empathize with why you would want to drag this out, why you would want to procrastinate writing your resume, why you would want to avoid networking with people that you might feel embarrassed about asking for help or coming out of the blue if you haven't spoken to them in 10 years. I get it. And that is really the key. The key is putting yourself in a position where you don't have to fake the funk. You don't have to imagine enjoying yourself. You can actually go after where you feel a sense of joy, where you know that you can thrive, where you feel proud of the work that you'll do. Could you imagine a possible scenario where you are doing something that feels aligned with who you are, what you want, and how you want to represent yourself in this world? I would argue that right now, in light of what's going on, in light of the chaos, in light of the stress, in light of everything that might feel unbearable, this is actually when your imagination is needed most. You really need to think to yourself, how can I, in the middle of this scenario, in the middle of this uncertainty, get through, but get through on top? How can I show others that it's possible to imagine something that might be difficult to believe at first, but is possible through your use of imagination and your use of creativity and your use of hard work and your use of putting yourself out there? How can you get to that place? I'll give you an example. I recall, and I, like everyone else, absolutely love being creative and imagining life in other parts of the world. That is part of why my family and I are in Australia. I imagine, how is it that someone in Australia, obviously it's not a homogenous society, but how is it that someone in Australia will imagine, let's just think about it, creating or putting together a cup of coffee? How is it that someone in Australia might imagine, sounding out certain words like schedule, which I can't say it necessarily as they say it here? There's all these different interpretations of life. Same idea. There's all these different interpretations of your career. And the issue lies when you're stuck in someone else's interpretation of what you can do. It's really crappy to feel limited by someone else's interpretation of your capabilities. And in order to rise above that, you've got to use your imagination. You've got to add a sense of wonder to how you approach your job search. Is it something that's easy to do? Just snap of the fingers? No, it's not. It's a new skill. Actually, it's not a new skill. It's a skill that you had when you were a little boy or a little girl. But what I'm asking you to do is to go back to that moment with the wisdom that you bring to the table today and imagine what's possible for yourself. But also realize that you can imagine positive outcomes and negative outcomes. And that is where a lot of times people do need the help of a coach, because the job search, as with anything else that has its ups and downs, can absolutely put you in a negative tone in the way that life expresses itself during those challenges. Or you can figure out a way to keep your head above the water, way above the water, through the help of someone who gets the fact that life is stressful right now for a lot of people, especially in the US. So I wanted to just come in, say hello, and talk about the use of your imagination. It is something that is not dead. It is not lost. There's no pandemic. There's no constraint. It is not canceled. You have access to it, and it's time to open up. So why don't you take a second today, a second tomorrow, whenever you have a moment, take a second and write down what you would hope is possible for you after this pandemic, where you want to be. Just write one line. I want you to play with your imagination, play with this idea that something that you may have never done before can now certainly be possible. We've seen stranger things. All right. Have an amazing rest of your day. Reach out to me if you need my help.